Well, you've made it to the book of Ezekiel and your Bible reading, and I wanted to give you some things to look for. I'm going to do 2 videos on this book. It's a longer book. Some basic themes, very similar to Isaiah and Jeremiah, but it's unique in that Ezekiel is one of the first exiles to go into Babylon. And so there he is in Babylon. He's not in Jerusalem. And then he gets this picture of God's glory. He's seeing this picture of these chariot type structures with wheels upon wheels, and there you see these faces, and some of them are like animals, some of them are like humans, and on top of this wheeled structure is a throne, and on top of that, amidst the cloud and the fire, you see this God's glory, God's presence there. It's very similar to Mount Sinai and what we saw there experienced, but Ezekiel is seeing God's glory, but he's in Babylon. That's why it's unique. Normally you see God's presence in the temple in Jerusalem. That's why they had the tabernacle. It's why they built the temple so God's glory could dwell with the people. But there he is in Babylon seeing God's glory. So very unique in that. And in chapters 1 through 7, he begins to speak out against the people of Israel, against all their injustice and idolatry and oppression against the poor. And in chapters 8 through 11, he sees this vision of what's happening in Jerusalem. Remember, he's in Babylon in exile, but he's seeing what's going on in Jerusalem, that they're following after false gods. They're setting up idols in the temple. And then he sees literally God's glory, Yahweh's glory, leaving the temple, leaving Jerusalem. And it's essentially saying, God's leaving because it's gotten so bad, so much sin, so much unfaithfulness amongst the people that God's glory is leaving Jerusalem. And it's a major theme throughout the Bible, right? That God's going to dwell with his people, that the nations are going to be blessed. Remember Genesis 12, all the promises and the covenants. And there is Ezekiel sitting in Babylon, and he's seeing God's glory leaving Jerusalem. And in chapters 12 through 24, he starts telling all these strange stories, these allegories of these sisters, of this tree, of this burnt stick, as you're reading through it. And he's using these stories to just talk about the unfaithfulness of Israel to the Lord. And just like Isaiah and Jeremiah, he's not just going to talk about Israel, he's going to talk about the nations surrounding Israel. And that's chapters 25 to 32. He starts talking about Egypt's sin and Sidon's sin and Tyre's sin, more accusations. And you say, wow, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of good news in this book. A lot of accusations. I'm seeing God's justice against all the unfaithfulness and sin, but it brings up all these questions about what about the promises of God? What about God's glory being with the people? Is he still going to be faithful to the promises to Abraham? What about the return of the Messiah? How are all these things going to happen if the people continue to be disobedient? And you're left wondering that when you get to the end of chapter 32. Now, he answers all those questions in the next part of the book, and we'll talk about that the next time we're together. Happy reading. God bless you.